Welcome to the Hailey Rowe Show. I'm a feel-good habits coach dedicated to helping you reach new levels of health, happiness, and high performance. Please visit www.haileyrowe.com for show notes. Let's get to it. Today we have Dan Sullivan on the show, and he is one of the first bulletproof coaches in the United States. And Dan, why don't you tell them a little bit about your background and your story?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. To your listeners as well, it's an honor. It's a privilege. So like you said, I'm a certified bulletproof coach. My background is in sports. I grew up as a hockey player playing ice hockey, and that took me all the way up to the University of Maine, where I played Division I college hockey. And, at that point, I really got interested in my health from a high performance standpoint. I was looking for the extra edge, wanted to be able to perform better. I was going through some ADD at the time, which I'm sure we'll talk about later in the show. And, I was really searching for some other answers besides medication. So that took me onto a very interesting path that you're aware of, with the whole bulletproof diet and all of these different lifestyle changes that we can make that have made a huge impact in my life.
Absolutely. Well, that's amazing. So you've definitely been required to take up healthy living due to being a hockey player and having trouble with ADD. Why were you not wanting to use the medications? What was that whole experience like?
Well, it was interesting because, growing up, school wasn't really my main priority. And, I was playing sports and doing music, and, I really loved those things. But, once I really tried to get serious about school, I was noticing that I couldn't concentrate. I was having a really tough time reading, for an extended period of time. So at that point, I didn't really know too much about diet, intervention, lifestyle habits. And so, a friend of mine or several friends of mine, were on medication for ADD, and they said that it really helped. So I was like, okay, I should probably try that. So I hooked up with a doctor and, ended up being prescribed a multitude of things, over the years. But something kind of deep inside me it didn't really resonate. As far as a long-term strategy, I knew that there were probably better options that I just didn't know about. And so, just kind of understanding that, and also with medication, not that medication's a bad thing by any means, but for me and where I was, it was just one of those things where I knew that there were other options. So it would, the medication would kind of work and it kind of wouldn't work. And I didn't really get the results that I wanted. And so that's why I started looking for other answers, listening to podcasts and reading books and, seeking out functional medicine practitioners and, trying things with my diet. And, once I found somebody, started working with a functional medicine doctor, functional neurologist, avoiding things like gluten, for instance, which I had no idea, right?
Yeah.
Being an athlete, having the pasta dinners and these, gluten fests that was just kind of the cultural norm that it was required to have those types of foods to perform well. And, I just started finding out that was indeed not the case, that there was a whole other world of functional medicine that was really fascinating to me.
Absolutely. And when you were with your buddies and going down this path of trying to look into holistic methods, how would you address the fact that not everybody knows what's going on or why you're not eating the gluten? How do you address that?
That was interesting. My last year of college, I really made the full transition. So I was actually the only guy on the team to do a gluten-free diet. And, some people think you're kind of weird, trying a new thing.
I've always been that weird person in my group, so I get it. But
sometimes you have to be.
Right. So If you were someone who was in your position and overwhelmed by all the information out there, what would you tell someone regarding how to get started? I know you mentioned podcasts. I know you mentioned working with a functional healthcare professional.
I think, to be honest, I find it very fulfilling to learn about this stuff. Obviously it's kind of what I do now for a living, but being educated, I feel like the more educated you are, the better off you're going to be. The more you can relate to if you go to a functional medicine doctor, some kind of a provider, a health coach, a bulletproof coach, even, the more you know about your health, the better of a conversation you can have and the more answers that you can get. So I would say, start with reading, read books, listen to podcasts, and, just seek out things that are interesting to you and that have to do with what you're going through in your health journey, and try to seek out maybe somebody that has gone through a similar path and has had similar setbacks. Those things have all helped me tremendously. And it's been a cumulative process where, the podcasts just add up, over the years. You don't even know how much you know after a while.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It's crazy to think about how much podcasts for free have changed my life. And however, it's hard to know who to trust or what's a valuable source. Do you have any advice for how to identify that?
Yeah, I would say, just personally, this is my own belief here, but when you're listening to podcasts, like Tim Ferriss's podcast or the Bulletproof podcast or, Ben Greenfield's podcast, all these kind of health related podcasts, more or less, there's, many more that are great out there. And I found very common themes that just run across the board that, all these health professionals are, or I wouldn't say all, but most of these health professionals are agreeing on a lot of the fundamental issues at play. And I think that if you listen to, a couple podcasts or, read a couple books or, talk to a couple of healthcare professionals, that you'll notice definitely some trends across the board. And I think those are the things that you can kind of safely follow. And then also, trust your own instincts, trust your own guide within yourself as well.
Yeah, that is a really good point, because a lot of the podcasts share the same common themes, like eat vegetables, go outside, get enough sleep. But on a micro level, you need to listen to different experts on the subject. You need to test it out for yourself, because not everything is a one-size-fits-all approach. When it comes down to exactly what to eat, exactly what workout to do, that is going to come from testing it out yourself.
Oh, exactly. I 100% agree with that.
What I like about your story is that you didn't just say, well, this is the way it is. I am going to have to take these medications. There's no other options. And what are some strategies you used during the journey to stay positive and not get discouraged, especially if other people were telling you, well, just this is the way it is, take the medication, and that's the end of it?
Yeah, like you said, mindset, having that belief in yourself and in what you're doing when it seems that not many people around you see the validity of what you're doing. So one of the things that I would do would be to, listen to these guys like Jim Rohn or, Tony Robbins or Brendan Bouchard, some of these kind of powerhouses in the self-development realm that really, Wayne Dyer's another one that had a big influence on me back then, especially in college. They were really essential to me in my mindset, developing a positive mindset around adversity, especially when you feel, somewhat alienated. If in this journey, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you're very interested in health and, success and what it takes to be a, happy and a healthy human being. And so sometimes what it takes to accomplish those goals goes against the normal grain of our current society. So the average society, obviously, our, rates of obesity and all such, illnesses are increasing. So the average is not really the healthy, what you wanted to model. And so, when you deviate from that, it does require a stronger mindset and a stronger self-belief in what you're doing. And I find that, constantly putting myself in front of other successful people and, reading books that are inspiring to you and, spending time with other people that you find uplifting and fulfilling and that accept you for who you are and not just, what kind of a weird diet you're, adhering to, or, what kind of funky glasses that you wear to better adapt to the light, for instance, So I guess those are some of the things that I would say.
Side note, if you're curious about what kind of glasses he's talking about, go to theprimetimehealth.com and check out the blog Hack Your Sleep. What about going back to the focus, the ADD? What were some of the things that you did or habits that you formed to improve your focus? What were 3 major ones that really helped you?
There were so many things. I think initially the realization that the diet had a big role. So I would say number 1 would be diet, and kind of a subcategory to that would be the elimination, for me at least, was gluten, dairy, and soy. And I'd also say with a caveat of sugar or refined starches, carbohydrates, and those kinds of things. Eating a more very high quality diet, the lean proteins, basically adding in healthy fats, where growing up in my family, fats were kind of almost demonized, where it was bad, you're going to get a heart attack or whatever from these fats that turned out to be, not so much the case. So I would say that would be number 1. Number 2 would be neurofeedback, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. So I did a bunch of neurofeedback, which had a huge influence on me and my focus levels, among other things as well. And then I would say number 3 would be the constant developing the habit of constantly learning and pushing myself in, realms that I wasn't very knowledgeable in, like health, and then really developing a passion for that. And, being okay to be a learner and to acknowledge that I didn't know and to be open to new ideas. I feel like that was a big one for me.
Yeah. And in a way, you took your challenge or a barrier that some people would look at it that way, and you turned it into a career path. You've turned it into a positive, meaning that you're learning a lot and you are sharing it with others. And also, hearing about the diet, I hear about the elimination diet and the bulletproof diet and all of that, but for someone who doesn't focus on that and is hearing you talk right now saying, oh, I got rid of soy, gluten, blah, 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 they are probably freaking out and wondering, what? Like, these things play a role on my focus and my energy. And is there any recommendations as far as like building on to changing your eating habits? Advice for someone who's just hearing this for the first time?
I think the focus on quality really matters. And it's a fascinating topic, because you can really dive deep into it. Going to a local farmer's market, where people are very conscious about health, for instance, and it's fun to interact and to get to know these farmers and, how they raise their beef, right? The grass-fed beef and their, organic vegetables and things like that. And you can kind of get around people that are knowledgeable and that really love it, and are really passionate about it. There's tons of other stuff that you can do. The world is really your oyster in this category, and there's so much great information about it. There's a whole variety of different supplementation that you can do. If you're working with a practitioner, for instance, getting some kind of comprehensive blood work done, through there's panels with, Wellness FX, which that actually, if you had asked for number 4, that would be my number 4. Getting a comprehensive blood panel, or multiple blood panels rather, so you can track your progress. Those really made a huge difference, and I'm actually still doing work on my health
to
this day. So
right, it's a never-ending process. But one thing that's amazing is that you're tracking as you go your improvements by using Wellness FX, which is not covered by insurance, if I'm correct?
Unfortunately not. I actually, where I work with a healthcare provider, and we actually do get a phenomenal deal, and I get the employee discount as well. But
Woo!
But you can either do the Wellness FX, but I mean, I think I did a panel actually with them years ago. I think a pretty basic but somewhat comprehensive panel was like $150. And I mean, you're worth it. You're worth, if you're listening to this, your health is so worth $150 to just get an accurate picture of what's going on. And it really helps too when you do reevaluations, a year down the line, or, just to see where you're at, just so you can stay on top of things. Because, what I say a lot to people is we'd rather turn the ship before we hit the iceberg rather than to hit it, and then try to turn the ship. If you go in and you have a chronic illness, for instance, it's a lot harder than it is to, do something now, do something today, get some blood work done, or, really start to focus on your health and, make some of these changes now. And a lot more can be done, and it's a lot easier.
Yeah, and testing can totally save you money in the long run if you say, okay, wait, actually my vitamin D levels aren't low. I don't need to be taking so much of this expensive supplement, So right. You don't have to buy all of these things that you may not need if you know your levels, or you might be able to be investing in the right things that you do need so that you're not just shooting in the dark. Now, when you said you do all of these things, diet, neurofeedback, I want to focus a little bit on neurofeedback. What is that for people who don't know what it is? And what does it do for you and for us?
Neurofeedback is a more advanced form of biofeedback. Years ago they had biofeedback. They have, heart rate variability now, which is a form of biofeedback. And so what neurofeedback is basically a form of training your brain, or training your brain waves more specifically, to fire in a more efficient or a healthier manner. Basically the process that we would go through, and I do this actually at the office that I work on people. So we start off with a QEEG brain map, and it's a relatively uncomfortable cap that you have to put on your head. It's not too bad, but so there's 12 different locations on your head that you would be measuring the brainwave output on. And so based on that, the way our system works is you would actually feed that into a system of, I think it's maybe like 60,000 different brain maps, for instance. And, over time they've mapped out what's healthy and what's not as healthy. And so, people come in all the time with things like ADD or, OCD or you name it. And their brain waves are kind of out of sync with a normal healthy pattern. And so what neurofeedback does is we figure out what areas of the brain are most out of whack, if you will, and then actually train those areas back into balance. And it's a really interesting process where all you actually have to do is sit down and watch a movie for about a half an hour. And it's really interesting because the movie will come in and out of clarity based on what your brain is doing. And so, for instance, if your brain is, outside of the range that we're trying to train it in, the movie will dim out, and so will the sound, and it'll happen instantaneously. And then once your brain is in the zone, the movie will come in full clarity, and then so will the sound. So it's just like riding a bike. Subconsciously, you don't have to think, oh, am I falling off the bike right now? You just know intuitively that you're falling to your right, for instance. So then you balance out, and it's really very much like that.
Yeah. And in a way, it's the same methodology. You train your body. It's the same thing with your brain. You're training your brain, but you have to support it properly.
Yes, exactly.
Can we all benefit from neurofeedback?
I think so, honestly. Brain fog is another big one. Even if you just want to perform optimally, say, I don't have anything wrong with my brain, I just want to perform at the next level. I think that neurofeedback is a great avenue, with the caveat of, having a proper diet, nutrition, and all that kind of thing as a fundamental first, or as fundamentals first. And so building neuroplasticity via neurofeedback is much easier with the right building blocks, like diet and nutrition and the right supplements and all that kind of thing. So we see a lot better results once, people are eating right and they're taking care of their lifestyle. So I would say step one would be to take care of that stuff first, and then you could try, to do some neurofeedback. Because I think for a long-term change, it works much, much better in conjunction with the diet.
Okay, so what are some affordable or not so affordable ways that we can do neurofeedback? How do we find it? Can we do it ourselves, or do we have to go somewhere?
That's a great question. This kind of fell into my lap, so I was very fortunate. However, I believe there's a unit or a couple units from Dave Asprey at the Bulletproof Exec. I believe it's bulletproofexec.com, but I think they have a unit or two that you could buy yourself. Now, there's a couple affordable methods that you could do, a little bit cheaper being the heart rate variability, which I know you know about.
Yeah, I love that.
And that's really helped me tremendously in a little bit of a different way, like a whole body, presence type thing, rather than specifically brain. That's I think they're maybe $100.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that has a tremendous influence with the feedback, the biofeedback. And then you can look online. There's something called 40 Years of Zen, which I'm sure some of your listeners have probably heard of, which is a pricier version of neurofeedback, an all-intensive version. I believe they take a week straight and really dive deep into that. But there's more and more practitioners, honestly, popping up all over the place, all over the States, or if you're listening abroad, I think there's actually a lot more even in Europe than there are in the States. Just look online, see if you can find a reputable practitioner. There's forums, I believe, on Bulletproof that members could help you out as well.
Yeah, those are great resources. I definitely think the beginner's version would be the heart rate variability. Now, what about, could someone compare neurofeedback to meditation, or is that completely different?
Yeah, I think they could. I mean, I think that neurofeedback is sort of like meditation on steroids. It's one of those things where meditation is phenomenal. I really think so, and I do meditate fairly regularly even now. The neurofeedback really brought on, for me at least, breakthroughs that I don't think would have happened as quickly. I could be wrong.
Right, because you were able to have feedback on if you were on track or not.
Right. Whereas meditation, you can sort of, know if you're in the zone or not, but not on a millisecond by millisecond basis, where I think that it really, when that happens, I think that your overall, your nervous system, your brain, or what have you, really take it in more, really integrate it a lot more efficiently that way. But I do think that even if you don't have access to neurofeedback, that meditation or heart rate variability, those are really tremendous practices to get in the habit of doing. I think there's a tremendous amount of benefits from doing those things.
Yeah. And how have you built neurofeedback, your healthy eating, your supplementation, all of those things into your lifestyle? What's a given day for you, or what would be considered a good day for you?
Sure. I mean, day to day can differ, depending on if I'm going to be working out, I'll eat a little bit differently. Or if I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, I may be, eating a little bit differently. If I'm doing neurofeedback, I might be supplementing with some more DHA, for instance, to help the neuroconnectivity. But, a normal day would be something like a, very nutrient dense breakfast, for instance, like some duck eggs, cooked in coconut oil with some veggies in there, like spinach or onion or broccoli. Could be a bulletproof coffee, for instance, if I want to do an intermittent fasting kind of a day. Lunch would usually be, and my office hates me for this, but sardines on a salad, which I find that those are, I was taken aback by those. I forget who I heard about those from originally, but I was like,
all those guys, Tim Ferriss, Dave, they all love sardines because it's low on the food chain, so it has less mercury, and it's a great source of a few different, I think, like, I might be wrong, but like zinc or something. I don't know what it is.
CoQ10, DHA, they're packed. They're just powerhouses. So,
and they're salty. They're very salty.
Yeah, if you could palate those things, good for you. And, if your immediate environment can tolerate it, by all means do that. But, so stuff like that, or even like salmon or some kind of a grass-fed beef with a salad, some avocado on there. And then, a pretty similar dish for dinner. Very high quality protein is going to be the essential, a lot of organic vegetables in there, whether they be steamed or, cooked, usually in a grass-fed ghee or a coconut oil, something of that nature. And then, relatively low on the carbohydrates, with some sweet potato or some quinoa kind of here and there. Getting most of my veggies or my carbohydrates from vegetables. And then, as far as the supplementation standpoint goes, I know there's a lot of people that do, smart drugs, things of that nature. I've experimented with those in the past. However, going back to what I alluded to earlier, the blood work and the importance of that, I think that a lot of people get drawn onto these exotic smart drugs, for instance, like modafinil or, the racetam family, or these types of smart drugs, which I think are very powerful and taken the right way can have a potent positive benefit. However, I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that people might miss if they don't, take just a basic blood panel just to see where their numbers are. Taking all the modafinil you want isn't going to help you too much if you're anemic or, low vitamin D or things like that. If there's kind of fundamental issues at play, that those need to be addressed first. And so I would encourage people to, rather than looking at, specifically what kind of supplements that I might be taking or, what kind of a diet I might be eating, to really take an individual approach and to really focus on their own fundamentals and then to work from there.
Definitely. I think it's good to listen to different people's perspectives and what they do and what works for them. And there may be some qualities that will overlap and work for you too. But like you said, it has to be an individualized approach. And what I like about your diet is that you're having a lot of brain boosting foods. Tell us a little bit about brain boosting foods. What are some examples? How come? Tell us more.
Sure. Brain boosting foods. It's a whole range of them. There's things like spices, like ginger and turmeric, which are really good for reducing inflammation. There's types of MCT oils, like the ones from Bulletproof, especially. I like the brain octane oil, which is good for, ketone production and utilizing that other kind of system for utilizing energy. There's things like fish oil, DHA, omega-3s, CoQ10 for mitochondrial support. There's all kinds of stuff out there. A full spectrum B vitamin are critical. I would just have the caveat of skipping the folic acid there and some of the B vitamin supplements and go with a folate or a folinic acid, methylcobalamin, B12, the methylated form is great. Adaptogenic herbs are awesome for brain function. So those are kind of the fundamentals. Magnesium's a good one. I think, there's a couple other ones like, up in Maine here where I live currently, vitamin D is, I think out of the hundreds of people I've done blood work analysis on, there's been only a handful that have adequate vitamin D levels, to be honest. So vitamin D3 is a big one that helps, not just with brain function, but holistically, immune function, hormone production, mood. Yep.
Totally.
So those are some. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. And I think that when you said the B vitamins, those are a game changer. And the reason why you said methylated, those are better absorbed. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Okay. And I think, for me personally, I actually do have the MTHFR SNP. So there's people out there, if you're listening and have no idea what I just said, that's totally cool. But if you do if you do have methylation defects or things of that nature, then, finding the methylated version of these things, which is exactly like you said, they're more bioavailable rather than something like a cyanocobalamin or just a straight up version of these things that isn't methylated. It's harder and it's more inefficient for the body to utilize those things. So not as many people see the effects from those kinds of things. Yeah.
And people who are scratching their heads right now, we're talking about genetic testing, which you can get done on 23andMe. There's a few other methods. And I, too, have some trouble in the MTHFR department. Is that right?
Yeah.
I went through that with a naturopathic doctor who helped me see what kind of genes I had. But it does impact what you want to supplement with and what you don't want to supplement with. And with the vitamin D, like 70% of people in our country are deficient in that. So that's probably a safe bet. It's a safe bet that you should get some supplementation unless you're outside all day naked.
I think so, yeah.
I think that you've given us a great start on what somebody should do if they struggle with their focus. What do you do when you want to be able to really focus, but it's a task that you have no interest in and you are not motivated? How do we set ourselves up for focus and success?
Great question. Still working on that currently. But no, one of the things that I've done is for those types of tasks that I find are challenging, that I'm, having trouble motivating myself to do. For the past, it's been a long time. I would say at least 4 or 5 years, I've worked with a friend of mine, or actually a couple of friends of mine in the process of the years, who are accountability partners. It's a process where we call one another, or we have a weekly call, every week at the same time, and we discuss our top priorities that we agree that we're going to do for the following week. And then we check in on each other about the past week, whether we've got our commitments done. And, that's a big one for me that's really helped, especially when it's something that I have a tough time, self-motivating, where it's a kind of a task that I don't really want to do it, but I should, I kind of have to do it. So developing, I guess, external motivation for that, not just relying on yourself, but if you can set up things like that, or even, set up a small reward for yourself. In a broader perspective, not just for this question, but in general, the accountability has really been a tremendous help for me. There's something Tim Ferriss recommends, like stick.com with 2 Ks. I think you can bet on yourself doing whatever you said that you were going to do. And if you don't do it, there's a punishment that happens. X amount of dollars are automatically withdrawn from your bank account or something like that. So you can also use that.
Oof, I've heard of that. And there's another one where you donate to your least favorite charity of all times, like
yes.
like the Nazi Party or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So then you really don't want to fail.
Yeah.
It's crazy that we'll do so much for others when there's other people involved. We stick to our commitments, but we let ourselves down all the time. So I do think that accountability is huge.
It's so weird how that happens, but it's so true.
What about environment-wise? So I know you said relying on external people. How can we set up our environment to have a lot of focus?
This is a big one for sure. I'm glad you asked, because for me at least, developing focus is really a practice in limiting as many distractions as possible. So besides, eating the correct diet so that you're setting yourself up for success. If you have your phone there constantly vibrating, or, constantly, if you have pop-ups on your computer, for instance, you're trying to work, or, your kids are coming in the room, or what have you, so just doing your best to set up an environment that is distraction free the most that you can, so, talking with your spouse about it and saying, please don't disturb me between this and this hour, or whatever it is, and if you have to check your email so much, set designated times for that. Don't find yourself just chronically, repeatedly going into an email, Facebook, Instagram loop that I know people listening are guilty of, because I'm guilty of it too. So those are some big ones for me. Putting the phone on airplane mode if I'm working. If it's an emergency, people can call 911. I think really protecting your time and understanding the importance of that. I think to build off of this, there's a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport that I really got a lot out of. And he delves into that a lot deeper than I'm about to do. And I think he does a lot more elegantly as well. But that would be a great resource in that category.
Love it. Yeah. And when you do have a day where you're not productive, you're distracted, what are some things you've done to prevent it from happening again, and kind of not dwell in your setbacks?
There's a couple things that come to mind. Trying to go back over what I did, so whether it's like at the end of the day, I'll usually do a daily recap, and then, a couple things I'm grateful for instance. When I do that recap, I'm thinking, what could I have done better today? Or, what was amazing today that I want to keep doing? And, so that I can reward myself for those things. So just, I would say take time to reflect. And the other thing that I do is I do a weekly review. That enables you to really take a bird's eye view of your life and what's kind of going on. And then it helps you to prepare for the future to try to mitigate those things from happening. So if you're getting to bed too late, for instance, or if you're having a tough time, disengaging from your phone and working, at the end of the week, you can say, what's really holding me back, and how can I, move forward? And so I think, for me at least, the habit that I've gotten into is definitely setting up the weekly time where I can review the week and then, set myself up for success, where I use something called the Weekly Rhythm Register by a guy named Darren Hardy. And in that, it's basically, just actions that you want to do, or, goals that you want to achieve this week. And then it gives you a Monday through Sunday checklist of those things. And so it's just a nice way, a visual way. I think, as human beings, we're very visual. And so that's one of the things that helps me to keep on track. And, if I have an off day, then I can see, I can't put a check mark in the box, for instance. So, and then I can look forward to the next day and say, I really want to get this done. And then I have my goals in front of me. I think that's another thing that really helps is to, it's really easy to get off track when you don't know where you're going. If you don't have your goals in front of you, like 3x5 cards are awesome. I review goals like that where I can just kind of keep them, in the front of my mind.
Definitely. I think the visual thing and being able to put a check mark by something is a game changer. And for me, I use Streaks. It's an app that allows you to see how many days you are practicing a certain habit you want to do. And the other thing, the goals, reading your goals daily has been huge as well for me. What was the thing you said something about rhythm? What is it called again?
So that's called the Weekly Rhythm Register.
Weekly Rhythm Register.
If you just Google it, it's a PDF. It's for free. You can just download it. I think it's from the book The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Okay. I love that
Classic,
book.
yeah.
Okay. Yes. How can we measure our progress regarding focus and mental clarity? We kind of just touched on one, which is reviewing, reflecting. Is there any other tangible ways? Because it's not like losing weight where you can, get your body composition tested and be able to actually see if there's changes going on. With our brain and our energy and our mental focus, it's a little bit more difficult to measure that. What would you suggest?
That's a tough one. There's a couple different ways where, I'm fortunate enough to have access to brain mapping where I work. So that's one of the things that I can use. I can evaluate, a former brain map to a current brain map, and literally see my brain and the brain waves. So that is really cool. Yeah. In the book Deep Work, Cal Newport talks about tracking the hours of what he calls deep work. The number of hours that you're spending doing the task that you're really passionate about. If you're wanting to write a book, or if you're wanting to, or even in your job, literally tallying the number of hours and having it in a spot that you can see. And, it goes along the lines of what we were just talking about, the whole visualization thing. Having things that you can actually see, a check mark or a tally or whatever. And I think that stuff really helps to build motivation and really builds momentum, which is huge.
Definitely. I think those are great places to start. What would be your parting words to our audience? Let's say there's someone listening who feels like they struggle from ADD or their focus and health is lacking. What would you tell them?
Sure. I think, somebody listening in that kind of a scenario, there's light at the end of the tunnel. If you dedicate yourself, a couple minutes a day to a certain discipline, learning some more about your health, listening to a podcast that's interesting to you, reading a book, actually getting up, going to the library or getting it on Amazon, and actually reading a book from a professional that really knows his or her stuff in the area. I think those kinds of things really start developing momentum. And sometimes it's very, very difficult and to see the light at the end of the tunnel when you're mired in it. And I can completely understand that, having been there myself and being very frustrated, not even believing really that it was possible to go another route other than, the medication route. So I can completely empathize with that. But I think that, if you just deep down dedicate yourself to that, to know that it's possible, from coming from somebody that's done it and I'm still doing it, daily. It's a daily process. And I think that that's another thing that, just to leave on is that, success, that health, it's, those things, happiness, it's not a one-time thing where I think for me, it's been a constant light bulb moment after light bulb moment, small wins and really, thinking about your goals and all these things really just start to tie together to build a beautiful life.
I love it. Yes. And how can we keep in touch with you and find you online?
DanSullivanHealthCoach.com. That's my website. On Instagram, Twitter, Dan Sullivan Health Coach, just search me.
Great.
Facebook, same thing.
All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Your story is very inspiring. And I feel like today we covered a lot of really good ground rules, improving your diet, getting tested, measuring your progress, things like that. So maybe we have an episode on a more micro level later on. But I really appreciate you for coming on, and thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Want to hear more shows? Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Get your free habits guide at HaileyRowe.com, and remember that any advice given on the show does not substitute for medical advice from your healthcare professional. Talk to you guys soon.